Laura. The name my husband Ethan used to call out so sweetly every morning. The name he whispered into my ear on long nights, as if I was his whole world. But tonight, I heard my name in a different way. Not from his mouth, but from a secret conversation, in a cold, unfamiliar tone. I woke up in the middle of the night, the bed beside me cold. Ethan wasn't there. At first I thought maybe he was in the bathroom or downstairs getting a drink. But as I was about to turn over and go back to sleep, a faint sound reached my ears. A whisper, low but clear in the stillness of the night. I sat up, my heart pounding. Ethan's voice, careful, controlled. But what sent a chill down my spine was the next sentence. She still doesn't suspect anything. My breath caught. It felt like an invisible hand had clutched my heart. That feeling, the one I had dismissed every time I saw Ethan hastily lock his phone screen when I entered the room, or when he dodged my questions about work, all of it rushed back, crashing over me like a wave. I quietly got out of bed, my bare feet touching the cold wooden floor. I followed the whispers to the door of his home office. A sliver of light peeked through the crack. I tiptoed closer, pressing myself against the wall, trying to hear more clearly. Yeah, I've already transferred it. Going as planned. Almost done. My throat went dry. Transferred what? Going as planned? I could hear my heartbeat thudding in my ears. Then came the sound of footsteps. I panicked and rushed back to bed, pulling the blanket up over myself. A few seconds later, the bedroom door opened gently. Ethan walked in as if nothing had happened. I shut my eyes, steadied my breath, and pretended I hadn't heard a thing. The mattress dipped beside me as he lay down. After a while, I could feel his steady breathing. Calm, like everything was normal. But I knew that behind that calm facade, he was hiding something. And it had to do with me. The next morning, while Ethan was still asleep, I took my phone and quietly went into the kitchen. I had never really paid much attention to our finances. Ethan handled the bills, investments, savings. But today, I opened the banking app. My eyes scanned the recent transactions. The numbers danced before me. $500, $1,000, $200, $750, $2,000. All of these withdrawals happened over the last 3 months. Not huge sums, but enough to make me realize something was wrong. I gripped the edge of the counter, trying to steady my breathing. These weren't for bills or investments. The money was just gone. Behind me, a voice made me jump. Checking the bank account this early? I turned to see Ethan standing there, leaning against the doorway, rubbing his neck like he'd just woken up. He smiled, but the moment his eyes flicked to my phone, a flicker of tension crossed his face. Just randomly checking, I replied, keeping my voice even. There are a few withdrawals I don't recognize. Ethan walked over, poured himself a cup of coffee, took a sip before answering casually. Oh, those are just some small investments. I forgot to tell you. I looked at him, searching for any sign, any little hint that he was lying. But Ethan had always been a great actor. I nodded, asking no more. But a different feeling was rising in me now. Not doubt, but a terrifying certainty. That evening, I watched Ethan more closely. He was texting nonstop, always placing his phone face down. He stepped outside to take calls, whispering like he didn't want to be heard. And then my chance came. Ethan stood up, said he was going to shower, and he did something he had never done before. Left his phone on the table. I waited a few seconds, keeping calm before I picked it up. The screen lit up with a new message. Sender, Elia Morrow. Message, just make sure she stays in the dark. Almost done. My hand tightened around the phone. My heart stopped. Elia Morrow? Who was that? And more importantly, what did almost done mean? My whole body went cold as I set the phone back on the table. I could hear the water running in the bathroom, But in my head, there was only one thought. Ethan wasn't just hiding something. He was planning something against me. I returned Ethan's phone to its place, my heart pounding like I had just stolen a forbidden secret. The words on the screen were burned into my mind. Just make sure she stays in the dark. Almost done. I had no doubt anymore. Ethan wasn't just keeping secrets, he was actively plotting to deceive me. And whatever it was almost complete. I stood up straight, steadied my breath, and quietly left the living room. The water was still running. That meant I had at least a few more minutes before Ethan came back. I had to act now. The next morning, Ethan behaved as if everything was perfectly normal. He smiled as he placed a cup of coffee in front of me, asking about my work with fake concern. I smiled weakly in return, trying not to let on that I knew the truth. "Laura, I think we should reorganize our finances a bit," Ethan said, placing his phone face down on the table, like always. "Just as a precaution. You never know what life might throw at us." I looked at him, eyes narrowing. "What do you mean?" "We should consolidate our assets. If anything ever happens, it'll be easier to manage," he said calmly, though every word felt calculated. "I'll take care of all the paperwork. All you have to do is sign." I gripped my coffee cup, trying to stay calm. I had known this moment was coming. He was trying to manipulate me, to make it sound like a simple legal step, but I wasn't stupid. I smiled, nodding slowly. "Sounds reasonable. Can you show me the documents first?" I saw a flicker of surprise in Ethan's eyes. Maybe he hadn't expected me to agree so easily. But he didn't show much heat. He just nodded and said, "Of course. I'll have them ready soon." I didn't wait for Ethan. As soon as he left for work, I called someone I trusted, Anna, my lawyer and best friend from college. I couldn't let Ethan win this game. I needed to protect myself before he made his move. As I told her everything, Anna listened silently. When I finished, she said only one simple sentence. "Laura, you need to move your assets immediately." I knew that. I'd been thinking about it all night, but hearing Anna say it made me even more sure. "We'll set up a trust," she continued. "Transfer everything of value into your name under it. Ethan won't be able to touch a cent." I nodded. "Do it." It took us less than 3 days to finalize everything. The apartment, savings accounts, investment shares, everything was protected. Now, no matter how hard Ethan tried, he couldn't take anything from me. 4 days later, Ethan came home earlier than usual. He sat down in the chair across from me, his face full of importance. I knew the moment had come. "Laura," he began, placing a stack of documents on the table. "I think we need to have a serious talk." I stared at the pile of papers in front of me. I had already guessed what they were, and I was ready. "I want a divorce," Ethan said, his voice calm, as if he had rehearsed that line 100 times. I raised an eyebrow, showing no surprise. "Really?" There was a flicker of hesitation in his eyes, but he quickly regained his confidence. "I think it's for the best. We've grown apart. I don't want things to get more tense." I stayed silent for a few seconds, then slowly pushed the papers back toward him. "Before we talk about this, there's something you should know." Ethan frowned. "What is it?" I took a deep breath, looked him straight in the eyes, and said clearly, word by word, "But I've already moved all of my assets." The air in the room instantly turned tense. Ethan froze, his eyes wide, his jaw tightening. "What?" "You can't take anything from me anymore," I continued, keeping my tone calm but firm. "Everything is legally protected. The apartment, the savings accounts, the investments, they've all been moved." Ethan was silent for a long moment. I could see the muscles in his face twitching, his hand clenching into a fist. He hadn't seen this coming. I smiled and slowly stood up. "You were right about one thing, Ethan," I said, my eyes locked on his. "No one can predict what's going to happen." He didn't respond. I knew he was calculating in his mind, but it didn't matter anymore. The tables had turned, and this time, I was the one in control. Ethan didn't say a word for a full minute. He sat motionless, still gripping the divorce papers he had just handed me. The anger in his eyes was unmistakable, but he was trying to suppress it, trying to appear composed as if he still had control. But I knew the truth. He had nothing left to take from me. I stood up, gently adjusting the edge of my coat. If there's nothing else to discuss, I think we can end this conversation here. Ethan took a deep breath, as if trying to grasp for something to hold on to. Then he gave me a forced smile, but I caught the calculating look in his eyes. "We'll see each other in court, Laura," he said, his voice low and sharp like a blade. "And you won't get away with this easily." I smirked, meeting his gaze with a look of defiance. "Then go ahead and try." I walked out of the living room, a sense of triumph flooding through me. But I also knew the real battle was just beginning. 3 days later, I received a thick envelope from Ethan's lawyer, a formal divorce petition, along with a long list of demands. Half of all assets, including the apartment I currently lived in, 50% of all joint financial accounts, a monthly allowance because, according to him, I had caused him to sacrifice his career to build this marriage. I laughed out loud when I reached the last line. Ethan had never sacrificed anything. Throughout our marriage, I was the one carrying the financial weight. He had lost nothing, but he still wanted everything from me. I picked up the phone and called Anna. "We've got a problem," I said as soon as she answered. Anna chuckled softly. "Let me guess. Ethan's not backing down, is he?" "Of course not," I sighed, flipping through the stack of papers. "He wants half of my assets, the apartment, and he's even asking for support payments." Anna scoffed. "He actually thinks he has a shot?" "No, but he's going to do everything he can to wear me down." "Well then, Laura," Anna said, her voice firmer now. "It's time we show him he picked the wrong opponent." 4 days later, Anna and I sat in her law office, going over the entire case file. Anna set the folder down and crossed her arms. "He doesn't stand a chance." "Are you sure?" I raised an eyebrow. Anna nodded. "You transferred all your assets before he filed. Legally, he has no claim to any of it. And the support request? He has no grounds. Your income was always the primary one in the marriage." I let out a breath of relief, but before I could enjoy it, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Be careful, Laura. Ethan doesn't play by the rules." I felt a chill run down my spine. 3 days later, I noticed something had shifted at work. At first, it was just strange looks from coworkers. A few whispers when I walked by. I thought maybe I was imagining it. Until my assistant, Rachel, walked into my office with a tense expression. "There's something you need to see," she said, placing a printed sheet on my desk. I looked down. It was a post on an anonymous forum. "A CFO embezzling company funds to hide money from her husband during a divorce. Can someone look into this?" Below were dozens of comments. Some were baseless rumors, but one made my stomach turn. "I know who it is," Laura T. I looked at Rachel, rage bubbling in my chest. "Ethan is behind this," I said coldly. Rachel nodded. "No doubt. And if this spreads, it could damage your reputation." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. I couldn't let Ethan destroy my career. "I need to see Anna now," I said, grabbing my phone. "We're not letting him get away with this." I met Anna that evening. When I told her everything, she frowned. "He's trying to use character assassination," Anna said. "He wants you to lose your patience and make a mistake." "I won't let that happen," I said firmly. Anna nodded. "Then we fight back." I looked at her, my eyes blazing with determination. "Do you have a plan?" Anna smiled. "First step, we send him a legal cease and desist letter. If he spreads one more lie, we sue for defamation and intentional damage to your reputation." I felt a fire ignite inside me. Ethan thought he could tear me down with lies? He was wrong. I looked at Anna, a sharp smile on my lips. "Then let's begin." 3 days later, while I was sitting in my lawyer's office, Anna held a folder with a piercing look in her eyes. "What is it this time?" I asked, trying to contain my frustration at her serious expression. Anna slid a document across the table to me. Ethan just filed a lawsuit accusing you of financial fraud. I froze. What? Specifically, he claims you embezzled money from your joint accounts before transferring your assets. Anna continued, her tone calm but tense. And it's not just him. There's someone else listed as a co-plaintiff. I opened the file, and my eyes landed on a name I had seen before. Ilya Morrow. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Ethan wasn't doing this alone. He had an accomplice. Who is Ilya Morrow? I asked, my voice dry. Anna crossed her arms. We've looked into him. He's known for creating fake financial documents. He's been tied to a few lawsuits, but no one's ever had enough evidence to charge him. I took a deep breath, flipping through the documents Ethan had filed in court. These numbers, these aren't my transactions, I snapped, furious. Anna nodded. That's what we suspected, but Ethan's trying to make it look legitimate. If we don't move quickly, this could get serious. I clenched my fists. Ethan couldn't win. I had come too far to protect myself, and I couldn't let him ruin it all with lies. Can we prove these documents are fake? I asked. Anna gave a faint, sharp smile. Not only can we prove it, but we're going to turn it to our advantage. Anna immediately handed the case over to a forensic financial expert. A week later, she called me into her office. You're going to like this, she said, her eyes glinting with a rare hint of satisfaction. I sat down, waiting. Anna placed a new file in front of me. They made a major mistake. The transactions Ethan claims you made all have timestamps from before your financial account even existed. I blinked, my heart racing. What do you mean? Anna tapped on a page showing a list of bank statements. This account was opened in July, but in the documents Ethan and Ilya submitted, there are transactions from May. They were too confident and didn't double-check their data. I stared at the numbers in front of me, then slowly a smile spread across my face. They just destroyed themselves, I whispered. Anna nodded. We're not only going to dismiss this accusation, we're going to sue them for defamation and presenting forged evidence in court. I took a deep breath, feeling a wave of excitement wash over me. Ethan had dug his own grave. 3 days later, Anna officially filed the countersuit with the court. Defendant Ethan Reynolds, along with accomplice Ilya Morrow, knowingly submitted falsified evidence to the court with the intent to defame and financially harm the plaintiff, Laura Thompson. Not only that, we also demanded compensation for damages. Ethan wasn't just going to lose, he was going to pay for every lie he had told. That evening I was sitting on the sofa, enjoying a rare moment of peace with a cup of coffee, when my phone buzzed. A no number. I answered the call. A growling voice came through. You think you're so smart, don't you? I smirked. Hello, Ethan. I'm guessing you just got the notice from your lawyer? I swear, Laura, you're going to regret this, he said, his voice seething with anger. You have no idea who you're messing with. I leaned back, my tone fearless. No, Ethan. You're the one who doesn't know who you're messing with. I heard heavy breathing on the other end, then the line went dead. I set the phone down on the table, the smile still lingering on my lips. Ethan could threaten me all he wanted, but I had seen the truth. He was desperate, and I wasn't going to stop until he paid for everything he had done. The courtroom was thick with tension. I sat upright, eyes locked on Ethan standing across from me. He was sharply dressed, tailored suit and all, but his face betrayed his unease. He was trying to appear confident, but I saw his hands gripping the edge of the table, fingers white from the pressure. The judge flipped through the documents in front of him, his eyes thoughtful before he spoke in a steady voice. Based on the evidence provided, the court finds that the transactions defendant Mr. Ethan Reynolds claimed plaintiff Ms. Laura Thompson made prior to transferring her assets were in fact impossible. A brief silence swept through the room. I looked over at Ethan and saw the slight twitch in his eye, his jaw clenching. He knew what was coming. The judge continued. A forensic financial expert confirmed that these transactions were time-stamped before the plaintiff's account was even opened. This clearly indicates that the documents presented by Mr. Ethan Reynolds and his associate were fabricated. A wave of murmurs filled the courtroom. I heard Anna let out a quiet laugh beside me, and I couldn't suppress the surge of satisfaction rising in my chest. The judge tapped his gavel lightly. Due to the defendant presenting falsified evidence in court in an attempt to defame the plaintiff, the court not only dismisses all of Mr. Reynolds' claims, but also orders him to cover the full legal costs of this case. I couldn't hide my smile as I saw Ethan's shoulders sink. He had poured everything into this lawsuit, convinced he could break me, but in the end, he was the one who had been destroyed. His attorney shot up. "Your Honor, my client—" The judge raised a hand, signaling silence. "Furthermore, due to the deliberate submission of false information to the court, I am ordering an investigation into the legality of the documents submitted by Mr. Reynolds and his accomplice." This time, Ethan froze completely. He knew what that meant. This was no longer just a divorce case. If the investigation confirmed that he had intentionally forged documents to manipulate the legal process, he would be facing far more serious consequences. I sat still, saying nothing, simply watching as the realization slowly dawned in his eyes. Ethan had lost all leverage. Not only would he get nothing from me, he now stood to face real legal jeopardy. The judge brought the gavel down one final time. "Court is adjourned." I stood up, adjusting my coat. Beside me, Anna flashed a victorious smile. A perfect knockout. Ethan remained frozen for a long moment, then turned and walked out of the courtroom. I could see the stiffness in his posture, his steps no longer confident. I slowed down, letting him feel my presence, letting him know I was still there, watching his defeat. He turned back, stared at me. I tilted my head slightly, smiling slowly. "Are we done here, Ethan?" He didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. He had lost everything. I stepped out of the courthouse, taking a deep breath. The air outside was fresh, a sharp contrast to the stifling tension in that room full of conflict. I had won. Not just a legal battle, but a long, grueling mental war with Ethan. A week later, Ethan's lawyer contacted Anna, trying to negotiate a deal to avoid the criminal investigation. We declined. Ethan brought this on himself, and I had no intention of helping him escape it. 2 weeks later, the rumors began to spread. Some of his former colleagues whispered about the case, about how he tried to cheat the system to win assets in a divorce. His company dropped him, and he lost the reputation he once had in the finance world. No one wanted to be associated with someone who tried to manipulate the law for personal gain. I heard he had to sell his beloved sports car to cover part of the legal fees. The luxury apartment he once lived in was also listed for sale. Everything he had tried to take from me, he ended up losing himself. I sat in my apartment on a quiet evening, sipping a glass of wine. My phone lit up with a message from Anna. "Congratulations, Laura. He's completely fallen apart." I smiled, set the phone down on the table, and looked out through the glass window. The city sparkled with lights, and I felt lighter than I had in a long time. I stepped into my apartment, embracing the quiet that filled the space. No more manipulative texts, no more late-night calls with Ethan's low voice threatening me. For the first time in months, I could take a deep breath without feeling the weight pressing on my chest. Victory hadn't come easily, but it came in the most meaningful way. I kept everything that was mine, while Ethan lost it all. A message from Anna lit up my phone. "Tonight, we celebrate. No exceptions." I laughed and typed back simply, "Of course." 3 hours later, I walked into a high-end restaurant where Anna had reserved a large table. My close friends were already there, chatting and holding glasses of wine. As I entered, applause broke out, and Anna stood up, raising her glass toward me. "This is for Laura, the one who taught us all a valuable lesson. Never underestimate a smart woman with a plan." I laughed and clinked my glass against hers. The wine touched my tongue, smooth and rich with the taste of victory. Beatrice tilted her head at me, her eyes sparkling. How does it feel knowing he has nothing left? I set my glass down and smiled. Honestly, relieving. But more than anything, free. Beatrice nodded, her expression full of empathy. You made it through, so what's next? I took a deep breath, soaking in the atmosphere, the gentle rhythm of the city pulsing just outside the window. Nothing was holding me back now. No one else controlled my life anymore. Enjoy life, I said with a soft smile. And never let anyone have that kind of power over me again. Everyone raised their glasses in agreement, cheering. I looked around the table. My friends who had stood by me from the beginning, who had seen me hit rock bottom and then rise stronger than ever. After the celebration, I walked alone along the avenue, my heels tapping lightly on the stone pavement. Chicago at night had its own kind of beauty, the golden lights from tall buildings reflecting off the streets, creating a dreamy glow. A cool October breeze brushed past, bringing with it a crispness that kissed my skin. I pulled my coat tighter, not from the cold, but to savor every second of this freedom. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. This isn't over. I stared at the screen, then smirked. I didn't need to guess who it was. Without hesitation, I tapped the number and hit block. I was fully in control of my life now. No more Ethan. No more ghosts of the past haunting me. I stood on my balcony, gazing out at the glittering city lights that stretched to the horizon. The air tonight felt fresher, lighter, as if I had finally removed the weight I'd been carrying on my shoulders for so long. My story with Ethan had finally come to an end. I had won. But this victory wasn't just legal or financial. I had reclaimed myself. Some life lessons arrive in the harshest ways. I once believed Ethan was someone I could trust, someone I could build a future with. I ignored the warning signs, thought love and trust could conquer everything. I was wrong. Not everyone is who they appear to be. Even those we love most can betray us in ways we never imagined. But more importantly, real strength isn't about avoiding betrayal. Because no matter how careful, how loving, or how much you give, some people will still take advantage of your trust. What matters is what you do afterward. Do you let it destroy you? Or do you rise, stronger and wiser? I chose the second path. What I went through wasn't just a legal battle with Ethan. It was a crash course in protecting myself, both financially and emotionally. I used to believe that love meant sharing everything. No secrets, no safeguards. But reality taught me otherwise. Protecting yourself doesn't mean you don't trust anyone. It means understanding that trust must come with preparation. Especially in relationships tied to finances, having a clear plan isn't a lack of love. It's how you ensure that no matter what happens, you'll still stand strong. Ethan thought I'd be an easy pawn to control. He planned, manipulated, and believed I'd crumble under pressure. But he was wrong. I stayed calm, made a plan, and struck back at the right moment. There's a special power in managing your emotions, in not letting someone else dictate your fate. Ethan tried to put me in a weak position, but his overconfidence and haste exposed the cracks. And I used those cracks to bring him down. I took a sip of wine, letting the subtle bitterness linger on my tongue. The past was behind me. In front of me lay a future I owned. It may have taken me a while to realize it, but from now on, I would never let anyone control my life again. I would never allow myself to be put in a position where someone else held the power to decide my fate. I had learned to protect myself. I had reclaimed the life I should have always owned. And I would never lose it again. Life isn't always fair, and sometimes the people we trust the most are the ones who betray us. Laura's story isn't just about a divorce lawsuit. It's a lesson in trust, preparation, and self-protection. In every relationship, especially when finances are involved, never lose control over your life. When faced with betrayal, stay calm, make a plan, and strike back at the right time. Because sometimes the greatest victory isn't revenge, it's reclaiming yourself. Laura's story is a powerful reminder that no one should ever lose control over their own life. What do you think of how she handled the betrayal? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to follow the channel for more real-life, inspiring stories about life and family. I am Lisa, 34 years old, working as an accountant for a small pharmaceutical company in the suburbs of Boston. I have been married to Andrew for 6 years, and throughout all that time, I have never truly felt like I belonged in his family. From the first time I met my mother-in-law, Margaret, I sensed that something was off. It was the way her eyes scrutinized me from head to toe, the polite yet cold smile, and the sweet yet subtly sharp tone when she said, "Andrew, you didn't mention that Lisa went to community college." Then she turned to me, smiling as if giving a compliment. "Oh, how wonderful that someone can build a stable life without relying on prestige." I forced a smile. Back then, I thought, maybe she just needed time to warm up to me. I was wrong. Margaret had 2 daughters, Emily and Rachel. Both older than me, both the kind of women she took great pride in. One was a medical resident, the other a marketing director for a cosmetics brand. In their eyes, I was just an ordinary office worker, nothing noteworthy. And they made no effort to hide it. At every family gathering, Margaret always seated me at the far end of the table, away from the main conversation. Emily would start talking about late-night emergency cases, Rachel would go on about her latest ad campaign, and I would sit there, nodding and smiling at the right moments, like a shadow in my own family dinner. And Andrew? He never said a word. I once whispered to him after dinner, "I feel like I'm not welcome." He just shrugged. "You're overthinking, they just need time." Time passed. 3 months, then 3 years. Nothing changed. Holidays, family trips. I was always the last to know, if I even knew at all. Once, they went on a week-long trip to Cape Cod without saying a word to me. When I asked Andrew, he casually replied, "I thought you were busy with work, so I didn't invite you." I remember sitting in the living room, watching Andrew text his mother openly, not even trying to hide it. I asked, "Have you ever thought about standing by my side?" He looked up, slightly surprised. "Why would I take sides? Everything's fine." Everything was fine, for him. He had his mother, his sisters, cozy dinners filled with laughter, while I sat alone in the kitchen or waited outside for the car because no one noticed when I left. Margaret remained the same. Her words always sounded like compliments, but beneath them lay veiled insults. "Lisa, that lipstick color is interesting, but as long as you feel confident, that's what matters." Or, "Wow, Andrew told me you're not much of a cook, but you've kept your husband for 6 years. That's impressive." I had sat in the bathroom crying, gripping a washcloth as if it could hold back my rising anger. I didn't understand why they treated me this way. What had I done wrong? I loved Andrew. I tried everything to fit in, but not a single person in his family ever truly welcomed me. They saw me as an outsider, and what hurt me the most was, so did my husband. I had stayed silent for too long, but I wasn't the type to bow my head forever. There were things I had seen, things I knew, and one day, I would no longer stand on the sidelines. This Thanksgiving, Margaret was hosting dinner at her winter estate in Ridgefield, Connecticut. The 3-story house, covered in dried ivy and glowing with warm golden lights, looked like it belonged on the cover of a magazine. Everything was perfect. Except for the emptiness I felt as I stepped through the grand front door. Andrew, as always, didn't hold my hand, didn't look at me. He just rushed forward to hug his mother, then turned to his sisters. Emily, dressed in an elegant blazer with the scent of expensive perfume, laughed as she recounted a recent heart surgery. Rachel, her blonde waves perfectly styled, leaned in to kiss Margaret on the cheek. I stood there by the shoe cabinet, wondering if I was truly invited or just someone's +1. "Oh, Lisa!" Rachel was the first to acknowledge me, her eyes scanning me from head to toe. "A red dress? That's bold." She didn't smile, but her tone and expression made her message clear. I simply offered a faint smile and walked into the living room, where everyone had already gathered around the meticulously set dining table. Dinner went as it always did. Perfectly roasted turkey, homemade pumpkin pie, and the same old conversations, replayed like a worn-out tape every year. No one asked about my job or my life. I was merely decorum. Silent, polite, unnoticed. After dessert, Margaret stood up and clapped her hands, her voice carrying the excitement of someone about to unveil a grand performance. Now, my favorite part, Thanksgiving gifts. Light applause spread across the table. I glanced at Andrew. He smiled as he poured himself more wine, not once looking at me. Margaret began handing out gifts wrapped in satin ribbons. A designer wallet for Rachel, a sapphire necklace for Emily, a bottle of 1998 Bordeaux for Andrew. Even Rachel's twin daughters, only 8 years old, received a limited edition Lego set. I sat up straight, hands resting lightly on my lap, saying nothing. A small flicker of hope still lingered in me. Maybe this time they wouldn't forget. Maybe. Margaret turned to me with an exaggeratedly bright smile. Lisa? Oh dear, I think I forgot to get you something. Emily burst into laughter. Rachel shrugged. No big deal. Lisa understands, right? I didn't say a word. And what hurt me more than Margaret or my sisters-in-law was Andrew, throwing his head back in laughter as if it was the funniest joke of the night. Suddenly, everything became crystal clear. 6 years of patience, 6 years of trying to find a place in a family that never wanted me. How many chances had I wasted to stand up for myself? How many times had I belittled myself just to earn a fake smile? I set my wineglass down and looked straight at Margaret. It's okay, I said, my voice as light as a breeze. Actually, I didn't forget about all of you. Silence fell over the room as if someone had switched off the music. I calmly reached into my bag and pulled out a small box wrapped in brown paper and tied with a silver ribbon. Not luxurious, not flashy, but neat and deliberate. I placed it in front of Margaret. For you, I said, keeping my smile. A very special gift. I saw a flicker of suspicion cross her face. Margaret hesitated, touching the ribbon with her fingertips as if afraid of what might be inside. Rachel and Emily leaned in. Andrew furrowed his brows. Go ahead, I murmured. Margaret unwrapped the paper, lifted the lid, and as she saw the neatly stacked papers inside, bank statements, financial transaction reports, and a summary of assets, her smile disappeared instantly. Margaret's hands trembled slightly as she clutched the pages, her lips pressed into a tight line, her eyes filled with confusion and disbelief. I said nothing, merely pouring myself another glass of wine, savoring the thick silence blanketing the room. Rachel grabbed a handful of papers from her mother's hands and skimmed through them. Her expression changed almost immediately. Lisa! What is this? I looked up, my tone as casual as if I were discussing the weather. Financial reports from Margaret's table. The event planning company my dear mother-in-law has been running for nearly 2 decades. Emily snatched another document, her gaze turning serious. These are bank statements, income summaries, and... Is this a tax return? Exactly, I nodded, a faint smile playing on my lips, with clear evidence that Margaret has been underreporting her revenue for at least the past 6 years. Some earnings weren't declared. Some expenses were inflated or completely fabricated. Margaret set her wine glass down, but her movement was so unsteady that a few drops spilled over. She turned to me, her voice hoarse. Where did you get these? I didn't have to look far, I replied, placing my glass down as I met her eyes. Just had to pay attention. A few numbers on the company's website didn't match the revenue reports. A few grand events were heavily promoted, yet missing from tax filings. And there were cash transactions. I know, because I saw them myself. Rachel inhaled sharply. Mom, is this true? Margaret didn't answer. She was too busy trying to mask the growing panic in her eyes. I tilted my head. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I also found that the parent company received a grant from the city, supposedly for post-pandemic recovery, but that money never appeared in the financial statements. You reported it as payroll expenses. Yet the only full-time employee left is your personal assistant. Andrew finally spoke, his voice unsteady. Lisa, why would you do this? I turned to him, my gaze calm. You want to know why? For 6 years, I've been invisible in this family, left out of every conversation, every plan, every ounce of affection. I never reacted, not once. But do you know what finally woke me up, Andrew? It was tonight, when the whole table laughed because I had no gift, and you laughed along with them. Emily spoke, this time without mockery. And how long have you been investigating this? Almost a year, I replied. At first, it was just curiosity, but the more I looked, the clearer everything became. Margaret started flipping through the remaining pages in a frantic attempt to find some loophole to refute it all, but the more she turned, the paler she became. There were bank transfers from the company into her personal accounts, there were falsified receipts, there were invalid tax deductions. Rachel took a step back. Mom, you told me you couldn't help when I needed a loan to fix my house. You said the company was struggling. Emily frowned. And you told me you couldn't co-sign my daughter's tuition loan because you couldn't afford it? No one was looking at me anymore. Every gaze was now locked onto Margaret, the woman who, just minutes ago, had played the devoted mother, now struggling to keep her composure. I folded my arms. I wasn't planning to report anything, at least, not yet. I just wanted to show everyone that if I'm going to be treated like I don't exist, then I can also make sure this family remembers me. In a way no one wants. Andrew stared at me as if he was seeing me for the first time. Do you really want to destroy my mother? I met his eyes, unblinking. No, Andrew. I'm just revealing the truth. She did this to herself. A moment later, Margaret exhaled sharply, her lips trembling. You can't do this. You'll bring my entire family down with me. I looked at her, my eyes unwavering. No one forced you to commit fraud. No one made you do anything wrong. And certainly, no one made you treat me like I was worthless. Rachel's voice came out hoarse, as if she had lost all her breath. Lisa, are you absolutely sure these documents are real? I nodded. Everything is sourced from the bank and the IRS. If you want to verify, you can call the accountant your mother's company used. I've already contacted them and kept a record of the call. Emily suddenly turned to Margaret, suspicion creeping into her eyes. Mom, you told me you couldn't help when I needed to put down a deposit on a new house. You said you didn't have a single cent to spare. Rachel flipped to another page, her frown deepening. This bank transfer here, it's from Dad's account? I nodded again, this time not looking at Margaret but at the man sitting at the head of the table. Henry, Margaret's husband, Andrew's father. He had barely spoken all evening. He was a quiet man, always in the background of every family event. But now, his face was gradually draining of color. No way, he murmured, reaching for one of the documents Rachel held. His eyes scanned the transaction details. Thousands of dollars withdrawn from his retirement account over the past 3 years, marked as operating fees, reinvestment, or worse, with no label at all. Margaret spoke, her voice sharp. Henry, you don't understand. It was just a temporary transfer. No, he cut her off, his voice quiet but firm. I never authorized this. I never knew. He stood up from his chair, gripping the papers tightly, his face white as a sheet. How much of this is real, Margaret? How much did you take? What did you do with the money? Margaret's eyes darted around, her expression faltering. I did it for the family. I needed to keep the company afloat, to take care of the kids. Rachel let out a laugh, but there was no humor in it. You can't say you did this for us when you refused to help me when I was unemployed. You said you couldn't loan me money to fix my house, but here, she held up a document. You transferred tens of thousands into your personal account? Emily stepped next to Henry, her voice turning cold. And this? This came from Dad's retirement fund. You took the only financial safety net he had. Do you even realize how awful that is? Margaret suddenly shouted. Everything I did was to protect this family's reputation. You don't understand the pressure of maintaining our image, of making sure no one looks down on us." Henry pressed a hand to his forehead, his breathing growing labored. He clutched the edge of the table, his lips trembling. I immediately stepped forward. "Are you okay?" He didn't answer. His face turned red, then ashen. "Call an ambulance," I shouted. Rachel had already pulled out her phone, her hands shaking as she dialed. Emily grabbed their father's shoulders, guiding him back into his chair. Margaret stumbled back, her face pale. "Henry, no, don't do this." He gasped for air, clutching his chest, his eyes glazing over. I rushed to the front door, ready to guide the paramedics when they arrived. My mind raced with questions. Would he make it? What else had Margaret been hiding? And Andrew, would he still stand by her after everything? The sound of sirens filled the air minutes later. Paramedics rushed in, carrying a stretcher and medical equipment. Margaret screamed his name, but I noticed she didn't reach for him, didn't hold his hand, didn't whisper anything comforting. It was all just tears and cries, a clumsy performance in the play she had written. Andrew stood frozen in the doorway, his eyes locked on the chaos in front of him. I looked at him, but this time I wasn't waiting anymore. No explanation, no apology could erase what I had endured. Andrew reached out, barely brushing my hand. "Lisa, is this real?" I nodded, my voice barely above a whisper. "Too real." As the ambulance pulled away, the family stood in silence. Margaret collapsed into a chair, all her usual pride stripped away. Rachel and Emily didn't comfort her. Andrew said nothing. I stepped out onto the porch, the late November air biting against my skin. But I felt light, as if a massive weight had been lifted from my chest. The waiting room at Yale New Haven Hospital was cold and eerily quiet. The white fluorescent lights reflected off the polished tile floor, making the space feel even more impersonal. I sat on one of the stiff plastic chairs, my hands clasped together, my eyes fixed on the blank wall as if it could give me answers. Andrew sat a few seats away. He hadn't spoken since his father was taken away. Rachel and Emily were murmuring with the doctor, their faces still tense. Margaret was somewhere down the hall, a nurse checking on her after she'd claimed to feel faint. But I knew. What brought her to her knees wasn't concern for her husband. It was the truth that had just been exposed. "Lisa." Andrew's voice was so soft I almost missed it. I turned. His eyes were clouded, full of confusion and exhaustion. "This." He swallowed hard. "Did you plan all of this from the beginning? Did you do this to get revenge on my mother?" A cold shiver ran down my spine. So that was his first thought, after everything. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" But, "Did you do this to destroy my mother?" I took a slow breath. "No, Andrew, I didn't plan anything." But I couldn't pretend to be blind any longer. I'd been pushed aside for too long, and this time, I chose not to stay silent. He stared at me for a long moment, then shook his head. "You don't understand. My mother isn't a bad person. She just—" I let out a laugh, though my throat tightened. "She's not a bad person. She humiliated me over and over, treated me like I was invisible. And you? You stood there, silent, smiling. Even tonight you laughed when I was cast aside in front of everyone." Andrew said nothing. I pulled off my wedding ring, the diamond catching the harsh hospital light, mocking the love I once believed in. I placed it in his hand so gently he barely reacted. "Lisa," he murmured, as if waking from a dream. I looked at him, not with anger, not with resentment, but with nothing left to hold on to. "Andrew, I didn't destroy your family. They did that themselves. I just refused to stay quiet." His hand clenched around the ring, his eyes reddening. "Are you leaving me?" No, Andrew, I said firmly. I'm choosing myself. I turned and walked away. The automatic doors slid open before me, the cold winter wind hitting my face, sharpening my clarity. My footsteps echoed against the pavement. No hesitation, no regrets. I didn't know if Henry would survive. I didn't care what excuse Margaret would come up with. But one thing was certain. From this moment on, my life would no longer be dictated by people who never valued me. Outside the hospital, I pulled out my phone and deleted Andrew's contact. Not out of anger, but because no matter what realization he might come to in the future, I wouldn't be there waiting for him to choose me. I chose myself, and that was the first decision in 6 years that made me feel truly at peace. Just 3 days after Thanksgiving, I received a message from Rachel. Dad is filing for divorce. His lawyers submitted the paperwork this morning. Mom will lose control of the company next week. I wasn't surprised. When I left the hospital that night, I had seen something break in Henry's eyes. Not just his trust in his wife, but the patience he had carried through decades of marriage. He was the kind of man who endured, but he wasn't a fool. And when the truth came to light, he had no reason to stay anymore. Rachel and Emily quickly made their own decisions. There was no family meeting, no final conversation with their mother. The sisters hired lawyers to investigate the money Margaret had taken from the family accounts and began legal proceedings. Rachel also mentioned that she was selling her current apartment and moving to Vermont, where her husband's family lived. She didn't want her children growing up in an environment that was as deceitful and cold as the one Mom created. I didn't blame them. In fact, I respected them for finally choosing to stand up for themselves, something I had once wished I had the courage to do sooner. As for Margaret, I didn't hear much except that she had hired a legal team to clarify administrative discrepancies with the IRS. There were rumors that she was selling the Ridgefield estate to cover the damages. No one in the family was taking her calls anymore, not even Andrew. He had called me 7 times, sent 15 messages, emailed me, even wrote a handwritten letter. I read every single one but never replied. There was one line in his last letter that made me pause. I was too late, wasn't I? Yes, Andrew. You were 6 years too late. I had once wished, just once, that you would stand up for me. But you never did. And now, when everything has fallen apart, you finally understand. But I've already moved on. I changed my number, locked my social media accounts, moved out of the old apartment in Cambridge and into a small, quiet place near the Charles River. Close enough to my office that I could walk there every morning. I bought a few potted plants, a new rug, and, for the first time in years, I put up paintings I liked. Without asking for anyone's approval. One Saturday afternoon, I brewed some tea and sat down with a leather notebook I had bought long ago but never used. I wrote one sentence. I'm not waiting for you to choose me anymore because I have already chosen myself. I smiled. Not the polite, forced smile I had worn for years at family dinners, but a real smile, light, unburdened. I thought about the time I had lost, the wasted efforts to please people who never saw me as part of their family. But I no longer regretted it. Everything I had been through led me to this moment, where I knew I deserved more. I didn't know how Margaret would face the trials ahead. I didn't know if Andrew would ever truly change. But none of that mattered anymore. I had walked away from a house that had given me nothing but silence and loneliness for 6 years. I had left behind a wedding ring, a symbol of a marriage that was never fair, and I had stepped out of a shadow I never belonged to. Now I was no longer Lisa, the daughter-in-law who had to smile and stay silent. I was Lisa, the woman who knew her worth, knew when to leave, and dared to do it without regret. And if anyone ever asked me, was it worth it? I would answer with a smile brighter than any Thanksgiving gift, every single second. From my own story, I learned that silence isn't always kindness. Sometimes it's self-destruction. 6 years in a family that never accepted me taught me one thing. If you wait for others to give you value, you will always be forgotten. The most powerful choice I ever made wasn't leaving them, it was choosing myself. Because in this world, no one will stand up for you if you don't stand up for yourself. What do you think of Lisa's choice and how she stood up for herself? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss more emotional family stories and deep life lessons. My name is Nancy. At the time, I was 33 years old, living in Denver, Colorado, and running a small company specializing in investing in and renovating old houses. I started from scratch, with no parents backing me, no one pulling strings for me. What I have today is the result of 10 years of working through holidays, weekends, and sometimes even without sleep. I'm not the showy type, but I'm proud that I was able to buy a penthouse overlooking the Rockies without signing a joint loan with anyone. I met Julian at a real estate seminar in San Diego. He walked into the auditorium with a kind of arrogant confidence that made people either curious or annoyed. I fell into the curious group. Julian wasn't just good-looking and charming, he was incredibly persuasive. He knew how to make a woman feel like she was the center of the universe, and even though I recognized the tactic, I still felt a bit unsteady. Julian introduced himself as someone investing in sustainable urban development projects, regularly traveling between New York, Houston, and Los Angeles. He never said outright that he was wealthy, but the way he drove a Porsche 911, wore a Patek Philippe watch, and casually mentioned a ski trip in Aspen made it impossible not to draw conclusions. I dated Julian for about a year before we got engaged. At the time, I thought I was lucky to have found a partner with similar goals, vision, and willingness to share. But what surprised me was how secretive he was about his family. Every time I asked, he'd just give a faint smile and say, "You'll see, they're a different world." And they truly were a different world. The first time I met Julian's parents was at a cocktail party at their mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut. The house exuded old-world pride, with ancestral portraits framed in gold lining the hallways, like silent overseers tracking every guest's movement. His mother, Patricia, was the type of woman whose eyes scanned you from head to toe before she allowed a smile. She wore an olive green Chanel dress, pearls, and even held her wine glass like it was part of some ancient ritual. She shook my hand and said, "Oh, you must be Nancy. How interesting that Julian chose such an independent girl." It sounded like a compliment, but I clearly sensed the thin layer of disdain beneath it. His father, Charles, was a tall, quiet man whose gaze seemed to assess your worth by the second. He didn't ask me anything about feelings, love, or my future with Julian. Instead, he asked about the average return rate on each property I invested in and seemed genuinely pleased when I answered smoothly. "At least you've got a business mind," he muttered. I kept smiling, but something about it all felt off. They didn't ask whether I loved Julian or if I was happy. To them, life seemed like a series of calculations. And I, apparently, was part of some larger financial equation. Julian stayed by my side, his hand gently on my back whenever the atmosphere felt stifling. He smiled, joked, tried to keep things light. I told myself it was just the first meeting. Things would change once they got to know me better. But I was wrong. Seemingly harmless remarks like, "It's good Julian found a woman who knows how to manage money," or "It's not easy entering a family with this kind of tradition," became more frequent. I'm not easily shaken, but I couldn't deny that I started to feel like I was being seen as a tool, a pawn they could maneuver to serve some deeper agenda. I didn't realize then that this was just the beginning, and that family, with all its noble, orderly, and wealthy facade, was hiding schemes I could never have imagined. 2 years after the wedding, one early fall afternoon, Julian suddenly told me that his parents wanted us to come to the Newport, Rhode Island estate to discuss the family's future. Even though I was used to their formalities, there was something odd in Julian's tone that day. He wouldn't meet my eyes for long, just brushed the topic aside as if it were a casual event, then quickly changed the subject. We made the trip to Newport the following weekend. The mansion stood by the sea, built of gray stone, looking more somber than grand. Inside were the usual expensive furnishings, ancestral portraits looking down from the walls as if whispering things I didn't want to hear. Patricia, my mother-in-law, welcomed us with her usual cold smile. She instructed the staff to serve dinner in the glass garden room, where you could watch the sunset dip below the ocean. But the beauty did nothing to calm my growing unease. We ate the appetizer in silence, broken only by the soft clinking of silverware on porcelain and the distant sound of waves. "Charles," my father-in-law finally spoke when the main course was served. He set down his knife and fork, pushed his chair back slightly, and pulled out a thick stack of papers from the briefcase beside him. "Nancy," he said, in a steady tone like he was giving a presentation, "our family is entering a new phase. To ensure financial stability and unity, we've prepared a small document." I looked at Julian, hoping to see a shared glance or at least a hint of surprise, but no. He smiled, tilted his head toward me slightly, and said softly, "It's just a formality, sweetheart. We're a family after all." I looked back at the document. On the cover, the Holloway Family Asset Trust Agreement. I opened to the first page. Just a glance at the opening lines was enough to understand the nature of this formality. I would be transferring all of my assets, my personal investment portfolio, 3 rental homes, retirement fund, and savings accounts into a trust managed by senior family members. And, of course, as the person creating the trust, me, I would have no authority to withdraw funds, sell assets, or intervene in any activities of the trust without written approval from the family board. "Are you kidding me?" I asked, my voice dropping low. Julian kept his gentle smile. "I know it sounds serious, but really, it's just a way to unify our finances. My parents are doing this to protect the family assets. You trust me, right?" "Trust?" I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. I turned to Patricia. She was watching me like a predator, waiting for its prey to step into the trap. "And what if I don't sign?" I asked, placing the contract back on the table. Patricia tilted her head, sipped her wine, then replied, "Oh, nothing really. It's just, it would be such a shame if someone didn't understand the meaning of family commitment." I smiled faintly. "Family commitment or asset control?" The air at the table turned heavy. Julian frowned. Charles sighed, his hand still resting on the documents. "Nancy," he said, "you're a smart woman. This is a chance for us to build a strong financial legacy. Julian's family is about tradition. Trust is the foundation." Then, I picked up the contract and flipped through a few pages. Why are there no clauses in here to protect me? No lines allowing me to withdraw funds if needed. No voting rights. No authority to sell assets. Just an obligation to transfer everything and sit back while your family runs the show? Julian quickly chimed in, his voice noticeably lower. "You're overreacting. It's really nothing. They just want to protect you. Trust me." I looked him straight in the eyes. "If it's for me, then why am I the one losing all control?" Julian went silent, 1 second, 2 seconds. Then he shrugged like he was tired of explaining. "Nancy, you're overcomplicating it. It's just paperwork." I placed the contract back on the table, lifted my chin, and smiled. "Well then, you won't mind if I let my lawyer take a look at it, right?" Patricia froze. Charles furrowed his brow. Julian, for the first time, lost his composure. Just then, the back door of the garden room opened. A woman with brown hair, dressed in a gray suit, walked in with a confident stride. She placed her document bag on the table and nodded to everyone. "Sorry for interrupting dinner," she said. "I'm Claire Preston, legal representative for Ms. Nancy." Petra glared. "This is a family matter. There's no need to involve outsiders." Claire didn't react. She simply opened her folder, pulled out a contract identical to the one I had just been given, and began to speak with a sharp, professional tone. "After reviewing the full content of this agreement, I can confirm that this is a blatant financial manipulation document. Not only does it demand the transfer of my client's entire personal assets, but it also completely strips her of any legal control over her own property." I saw Patricia's hand tighten into a fist. Charles frowned but remained silent. Claire continued, This contract offers no protection for Nancy's interests. On the contrary, it places her in a completely passive position, unable to withdraw funds, object to decisions, or access financial information without written consent from her in-laws. This isn't asset consolidation. This is appropriation. That's enough, Charles spoke, his voice deep and heavy. No one here is trying to harm Nancy. You're overinterpreting. Claire responded calmly. Then why is the contract structured so that she loses all control over her assets, while the other side gains full authority? If this is a family matter, then why was it kept from her until the very last minute? Julian tried to jump in. Claire, I think we can talk privately. This isn't? No, I cut him off. We're going to talk, right here, in front of everyone. No more just a formality or trust me. I've trusted you for 2 years, and this, I tapped the contract, is what I get in return. Patricia regained her usual soft tone, though it sounded strained this time. Nancy, dear, we just want to protect you. Money can be dangerous, and there are risks you can't always foresee. I laughed, but there was no joy in it. Funny, I've faced risks my entire life to build everything from scratch. And now my in-laws, who haven't contributed a dime, are asking me to hand over everything in the name of protection? Julian stood in silence. No more justifications, no more gentle smiles. I looked at Claire. I'm not signing anything, and if they keep pushing, I'm prepared to take this to court as a case of asset interference and abuse of marital power. Claire nodded. I'll start preparing a case to protect your rights, and from this point forward, I suggest that all financial contact from your husband's family be made in writing and in the presence of legal counsel. I stood, gathering my bag. Thanks for dinner. I think I've had enough family warmth to last me the whole year. Patricia said nothing. Charles remained silent. Julian sat motionless like a statue. I turned and walked out of the glass garden room, hearing Claire's steady footsteps behind me. On the way to the car, Claire spoke softly. You handled that very well, but I don't think this is over. I looked straight at the wrought iron gate opening before us, a faint smile on my lips. I don't think so either. They picked the wrong person to mess with. I left the Holloway estate that night feeling not just betrayed, but as if I had just escaped a trap 2 years in the making. On the drive back, Claire stayed silent, occasionally glancing at me through the rearview mirror, as if checking to see if I was still composed. I didn't say a word. Inside me, one part still trembled with fury, but another had switched on, the part that had helped me build an entire business from nothing. Cold, precise analysis. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in front of my laptop, pulling up every financial statement, every bank transaction I had once overlooked, thinking, married couples shouldn't keep score. But now, everything was suspicious. I found a few odd transactions from a secondary account. One Julian had asked me to open with him, for our joint investment plan. I hadn't paid attention at the time. I trusted my husband. Trusted that he was educated, calculated, and would never betray the one person who stood by him when the world still barely knew his name. The next morning, I called Claire. I need a private investigator, I said bluntly. Someone really good. Claire didn't ask why. She simply replied, I know someone. I'll reach out today. That afternoon, I met Adam. A man in his 40s, quiet, sharp, with the kind of look that had seen too many dark corners of the world. I gave him everything I had on Julian. Bank accounts, emails, phone numbers, even small details like travel patterns, frequent locations, and names he often mentioned socially. I want to know everything, I said. Debts, assets, outside relationships, and if there are any loans taken out under my name, I want proof. Adam nodded, no extra words. I'll get started. Don't expect results immediately, but when I find something, I'll let you know. 3 days later, Adam called. His tone hadn't changed, but there was something in his voice that made my blood run cold. You might want to be sitting down when you read the report I just sent, he said. I opened the PDF file the moment we hung up, and as I skimmed through the first few pages, I understood why he gave that warning. Julian Holloway, my husband, the man who sat beside me each night, kissed my forehead and said everything will be fine, was drowning in debt. Not just a few credit cards or failed real estate loans. It was a long list of personal debts, failed investments, and, worst of all, a $120,000 business loan taken out in my name, filed through a shell company he quietly created. I had no idea. No signature of mine was on file, but somehow, he had made it happen. I called Adam immediately. That loan, my voice cracked. Are you sure the signature is forged? There are signs of Photoshop and unauthorized use of personal data, he confirmed. I have someone digging deeper, but that's not the worst part. I froze. What's worse than this? Adam exhaled lightly on the line. He's living a double life, Nancy. At least 2 other women. One in Chicago, one in Miami. I'm just getting started, but both of them think they're the only one. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What are their names? Lisa Hartley, high school teacher, 31. They've been dating for almost 2 years. And Hannah Reeves? Gallery assistant, 27. According to the data I found, he's engaged to Hannah. The wedding is scheduled in 6 weeks. I stood still for a long moment. My mind was spinning with memories, Julian's sudden business trips, the unanswered messages at night, and that ring I once found in a drawer. Thinking it was for me, before he quickly hid it, saying it was for his cousin in Florida. It was all a lie. A perfectly crafted act. I need to meet both of them, I said. My voice no longer shook. It was sharp as a blade. Adam was silent for a moment, then replied, I'll arrange it. That night, I sat by the apartment window, watching the city lights. I thought about Lisa, possibly waiting for a date that would never happen. I thought about Hannah, planning a wedding, completely unaware she was about to marry someone else's husband. And I thought about myself, the woman who had shared a bed with a con artist for 2 years and never knew. Julian had calculated every move, but maybe he misjudged one thing. I don't fall easily. And I never let someone else get hurt the way I was, without doing something about it. I set down my glass of water, eyes cold as steel. The game had only just begun. I met Hannah at a small cafe in Brooklyn where the soft amber lighting and mellow jazz music helped soften the weight of silence. When she walked in, I recognized her instantly. Not because I had seen her photo in the detective's report, but because of her eyes. Bright with trust, happiness, and the nervous excitement of someone about to get married. Hannah didn't recognize me right away, but when I placed my wedding ring on the table, silently, without explanation, she froze. I watched her whole world collapse in a single blink. What is this? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm Julian Holloway's wife, I replied slowly. And I'm afraid you're not the first woman he's promised a future to. Tears streamed down her face. Not sobbing, but the kind of tears that come with sudden, chilling clarity. Hannah told me everything. From the day Julian showed up at the gallery with a huge bouquet, to his story about an inheritance on the way that just required them to marry on time. I signed a power of attorney for him to withdraw my savings, she whispered. He said it was temporary, just to prove financial standing to the probate court. I held her hand. He took out a loan of over $100,000 in my name without me knowing. And now, I think we have a chance to do something. Not just to get justice, but to end this chain of deception. We spent the next 3 days planning. Claire met with my attorney, handled the legal side. Adam, the private investigator, gathered more evidence. Bank accounts, forged signatures, and documents Julian had sent to Lisa. The third woman in his web of lies. Julian suspected nothing. He was still texting Hannah daily about tablecloth colors, guest lists, and the upcoming Meet the Parents dinner in Manhattan, an event arranged at a luxury restaurant by the Holloway family. That would be the last night Julian thought he was in control. I arrived at the restaurant ahead of time, along with Claire and Hannah. Everything was meticulously prepared. Copies of documents, photos, recordings, and 2 identical wedding rings placed side by side in a black velvet box. When Julian walked in, his arm around Hannah's waist, his face lit up. But when he saw me sitting there in the middle of that elegant room, his smile froze. "You," he stammered, eyes darting from me to Hannah and back again. "Nancy, why are you—" "Long time no see, darling husband," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. Charles and Patricia were there too, and the moment they grasped what was happening, the atmosphere shifted. Patricia jumped up. "What is this? This is a family dinner, not a stage show." "No," I said, my eyes locked on Julian. "This is the last dinner you'll perform at without getting caught." Claire stepped forward, opening her bag and pulling out a stack of documents. "If I may present a few findings," she said. "First, Julian Holloway took out a $120,000 loan under the name of Nancy Holloway, his legal wife, without her consent or verified signature. This constitutes forgery and unauthorized use of personal information." Patricia's breath caught. Charles scowled at Julian like he was seeing a stranger. "Second," Claire continued, "while still legally married to Nancy, Julian became engaged to Ms. Hannah Reeves, currently standing here, with the promise of marriage to secure a portion of the Holloway inheritance. This constitutes marital fraud and indicates an attempt to exploit the estate." Hannah said nothing. She simply stepped forward, opened the velvet box, and placed the ring Julian gave her next to mine. The 2 were identical. The room froze. Julian looked around, no escape in sight. "You don't understand," he turned to me. "Nancy, why are you doing this? We can talk. You didn't have to." "Don't," I cut him off, my eyes like steel. "You were involved with 3 women at the same time. You took money from me, from Hannah, from Lisa, and now you're trying to drag your family's estate into this scam? I won't stay silent anymore." Patricia collapsed back into her seat, trembling. Charles lowered his head, saying nothing. Julian took a step back, his voice cracking. "You can't just destroy everything like this." "No," I said, turning away from the table. "You destroyed everything. I just turned on the lights." As soon as we left the restaurant that night, Hannah and I got into Claire's car, waiting across the street. She didn't say much, just handed me a thick envelope and nodded. "I submitted all the documents to the authorities at 8 p.m., just as planned," she said. "We won't have to wait long." Not even 15 minutes later, as our car turned the corner, I saw red and blue lights reflecting off the restaurant's stone walls. 2 police cruisers parked at the entrance. I didn't look back. I just closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and let my body finally relax for the first time in months. Julian was arrested right at the dinner table. According to Claire the next morning, the police arrived with a warrant for 3 charges: financial fraud, unlawful use of identity for obtaining loans, and marital deception. The evidence was undeniable, from fake bank documents and forged signatures to suspicious transfers to offshore accounts. Through Adam's investigation, a few internal emails from Julian's company revealed that he had been crafting a fake financial profile to legitimize his claim to the family inheritance, contingent on a legal and outwardly stable marriage. But his real marriage, to me, was exactly what brought everything down. 3 days later, Julian's bank accounts were frozen. The court issued an emergency injunction to seize the Holloway family's assets after discovering years of hidden debts, funneled through shell companies and high-risk credit maneuvers. Patricia Holloway appeared in the press the very next morning, trying to deny involvement and placing all the blame on her son. But journalists quickly uncovered documents she had signed. Shady paperwork, including the very trust agreement they tried to get me to sign during that infamous dinner. Charles, the man who had always worn a cold, commanding mask, vanished from public view, offering no statements. All anyone knew was that he sold their multi-million-dollar yacht and temporarily transferred ownership of the Newport estate to a law firm, likely as legal collateral. And me? I returned to my apartment in Denver, Still the same penthouse, still the same glass window looking out to the mountains. But this time, I wasn't alone. Hannah came by after Julian's first hearing. We sat at the small kitchen bar, opened 2 bottles of sparkling water, and baked frozen pizza. A simple meal, but oddly comforting. She laughed as she recalled the moment Julian was cuffed. "He looked at me like I'd stabbed him in the back," Hannah said. "But really, he just didn't know I'd finally learned to protect myself." I nodded. "I get it. He made us believe it was all about love, about the future. But really, his future was just a new wallet to drain." We clinked our glasses. No fireworks, no grand celebration. Just 2 women who had been lied to, sitting in warm light, giving themselves a well-earned moment of peace after the storm. A message came in from Claire right after. "Julian will remain in custody pending trial. No bail granted. The court has also approved a freeze on his assets until the investigation concludes." I set my phone down, leaned back in my chair, and exhaled. For once, a genuine sigh of relief. I thought of Lisa, the first woman Julian deceived. She had sent a thank you email when she found out we exposed the truth. I never met her in person, but I knew she was reclaiming what was rightfully hers, both financially and emotionally. Things didn't go back to how they were, and I didn't want them to. I had lost 2 years of my life to someone who didn't deserve them. But what I regained, my self-respect, my dignity, and my voice, was worth more than anything. Hannah smiled as she refilled our glasses. "Some people say revenge isn't worth it," she said. I looked at her, eyes lit, a calm smile on my lips. "I don't think so." From my own story, I realized that sometimes the person who hurts you most is the one you trusted the most. But instead of letting the pain crush me, I chose to face it, expose the truth, and reclaim control of my life. Betrayal is a fall, but if you rise the right way, you'll be stronger than ever. Revenge isn't about rage. It's about showing that I'm not someone who can be controlled, and I will never be silent. What do you think about Nancy's story and the choices she made? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss any emotional family stories and meaningful life lessons.